I pulled into Cedar Rapids, with my gas light blinking. My bank account held exactly $2,743. Hardly enough to cover the next semester's books at the University of Iowa, let alone survive winter break. Mom and Dad had made it clear this year. I needed to build character by funding my own education. Translation. They were still mad about my switch from Prem'd to English Lit. I filled up my tank with $15 of gas at a Sunoco station just off Highway 13, leaving me with barely enough for a couple of meals. As he walked inside to pay, a white sheet of paper taped to the door caught my eye. Help wanted. Evening shift. Apply within. This looked like perfect timing, and I wasn't going to pass it up. The inside of the gas station looked like any other. Fluorescent lights buzzing above ahead, aisles of snacks and necessities, coolers lining the back wall. A middle-aged guy with a receding hairline stood behind the counter, punching numbers into a very old register. "Excuse me," I said, approaching the counter. I saw the help wanted sign. "Who do I talk to about applying?" He looked up, eyes checking from head to toe. "You're talking to him. I'm Robert. I own the place." Heck closed the register drawer with a ding. "You looking for work?" "Yes, sir. I'm James Wilson. I'm home from college for winter break and could really use the money." Robert nodded. "Ever worked at retail before?" "I worked at a bookstore last summer." "Good enough. When can you start?" I blinked, surprised by the lack of formality. No application. No interview. Today. Now. Perfect. Evening shift runs from 5 to 1:30 in the morning. Pays $12 an hour cash every Friday. He stuck out his hand. "Welcome aboard." I shook it, wondering if I should question why he'd hire a complete stranger on the spot, but my empty wallet made the decision for me. "I'll get you some paperwork when you come in tonight," Robert said. "Show up at 4:30 and Bruce will train you." I drove to my parents' house feeling both relieved and suspicious. Jobs didn't usually fall into your lap, but money was money, and beggars couldn't be choosers. When I returned to the gas station that evening, Robert handed me a stack of tax forms and a red vest with Sunoco logo. He gave me a 5-minute tour of the place, showing me how to work the register and where they kept the cleaning supplies. "Bruce should be here any minute," Robert said, checking his watch. "He's been working nights here for 20 years. Listen to him. He knows what he's talking about." With that cryptic statement, Robert left. Bruce arrived 10 minutes later. He looked about 60, with weathered skin and deep lines etched into his face. His gray hair was cut short, and his hands were rough and calloused. He nodded at me once. No smile. "You, the new guy." His voice was grayly, like he'd spent decades smoking. "Yeah, James Wilson." He offered my hand. He ignored it. "Robert, give you the rundown. Just the basics. Register, cleaning, stuff like that." Bruce grunted. "That's not what matters." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "These are the rules. Learn them. Follow them. No exceptions." I took the paper and unfolded it. The handwriting was neat but cramped. 1. Lock the doors at 1:30 a.m. sharp. Do not unlock them until 5 a.m. No matter what you see or hear. 2. If anyone asks for lucky strikes, turn on the beer cooler light, count to 10, then say, "We're out." 3. If a tall biker in black leather comes in after midnight, give him a pack of Marlboro and the most expensive whiskey, without being asked. 4. If you see someone on the security camera who isn't in the store, call this number immediately. 555,173. 5. If a black car parks but no one gets out, don't look at it. I read through the list twice, waiting for Bruce to crack a smile or tell me a Wausau joke. He didn't. "What is this?" I asked, waving the paper. "The rules," Bruce said flatly. "Follow these exactly or you won't last a week." "Are you serious? What happens if someone asks for lucky strikes, and I just give them to them?" Bruce's eyes narrowed. "You won't do that. Not if you want to keep working here." I laughed, trying to ease the tension. "Come on, man. What's the real deal with these rules?" "That is the real deal." His tone left no room for argument. "Robert lets me handle the night shift my way because my way works. You want this job. You follow the rules." I pocketed the paper, figuring it was easier to humor him than argue. "Sure, whatever you say." Bruce spent the next hour showing me the security system, how to manage inventory, and where the panic button was located. The whole time he kept glancing at the windows, as if expecting someone or something to appear. "I'll be back tomorrow night to check on you," Bruce said as he left. "Stay behind the counter as much as possible." After Howe was gone, I pulled out the rules again and read them over. The whole thing seemed like the paranoid ramblings of a word old man who'd been working alone at night for too long. I tucked the paper under the register and decided not to worry about it. The next 2 evenings passed without incident. I served customers, stocked shelves, and scrolled through social media. When business was slow, the rules sat forgotten under the register. On my third night, things changed. It was a slow Wednesday in December. The cold had kept most people home, and it only had a handful of customers after 10 o'clock. By 1 a.m., I was alone in the store watching YouTube videos on my phone. The clock hit 1:30 a.m. I remembered the first rule and looked at the doors. They were supposed to be locked now, according to Bruce's list. I paused, then figured I might as well do it. I couldn't see any reason not to, and Robert might come by to check. You walked around the store, turning the deadbolts on both the front and side entrances. Back at the register, he settled in for the final hours of my shift. At 1:47 a.m., I heard a soft but distinct tapping sound coming from the front of the store. Tap, tap, tap. I looked up from my phone. Through the glass doors, I could see someone standing outside. At first glance, it looked like a person. Maybe a customer who didn't notice we were closed. I was about to wave them away when something about their outline made my skin crawl. Their proportions were wrong. The arm shank too low, nearly reaching the knees. The neck bent at an angle that would snap human vertebrae. And though I couldn't make out a face in the darkness, I could feel it watching me. Tap, tap, tap. Its finger against their glass was long and bent, like a broken pencil. It tapped with mechanical precision, never changing rhythm or force. I backed away from the counter. Every instinct told me not to approach the door, not to get a closer look. I went to the back office where the security monitors showed every angle of the store and parking lot. On camera, the thing looked even more unnatural. Its movements were jerky as it circled the building, trying each door, each window, tapping, always tapping. The cameras didn't capture its face, just a blur where features should be. For 17 minutes, I know because I watched the clock. The thing continued its search the building. Then, at 2:04 a.m., it simply walked away. Movement still wrong and disjointed into the darkness beyond the parking lot lights. I spent the rest of my shift in the office, watching the monitors, holding the rules. When morning came, I waited for Bruce in the parking lot. He took one look at my face and nodded knowingly. "You saw something last night," he said. Not a question. I told him everything. The tapping, the figure with its impossible proportions, how long it stayed. Bruce didn't seem surprised. Hadn't tell me I was crazy or that I must have been tired and seeing things. He just nodded again. "That's why we have the rules," he said simply. And in that moment, I knew the other 4 rules weren't jokes. Either something was very wrong with this gas station. If I wanted to make it through winter break, I needed to take Bruce's warnings seriously. 5 days into my new job at Thessanaco, and I'd gotten pretty good at jumping at shadows. That thing with the tap-in at window had changed everything. Bruce's rules weren't some weird hazing ritual, or the paranoid ramblings of a night shift lifer. They were a survival guide. I kept the folded paper in my pocket now, taking it out occasionally to review the list. Having it with me made me feel safer when I was alone in the store at night. The first rule was easy enough to follow. Lock the doors at 1:30 a.m. sharp. I'd been doing that religiously since the window tapper's visit. The 5th rule, 2. Don't look at black cars if no one gets out. Hadn't been tested yet, thankfully. But the others were always on my mind. Particularly number 2. If anyone asks for Lucky Strikes, turn on the beer cooler light. Count to 10. Then say, "We're out." It seemed oddly specific, and I wondered when or if I'd ever need to use it. December 20th turned out to be just another quiet night at the Sunaco, a Tuesday. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and the roads were nearly empty. I had served only a handful of customers since my shift began, mostly truckers filling their thermoses with burnt coffee before continuing their long hauls. Across Iowa. Around 10, I decided to make myself useful by restocking the candy aisle. The mindless task of arranging Snickers and M&M's packets kept my hands busy while my mind wandered to the essay I needed to finish over break. Something about symbolism in Melville that I'd been putting off for weeks. By 11 o'clock, the station had been empty for over an hour. I was scrolling through Instagram, looking at photos of friends enjoying their vacations in places much warmer than Cedar Rapids, when the front door chimed. I glanced up to see a man in a gray business suit step inside. There was nothing immediately unusual about him. Average height, well-dressed, carrying himself with the confidence of someone used to being in charge. But something about the way he moved seemed too precise. Each step covered exactly the same distance. His head turned in robot-like movements as he looked around the store. He walked down the chip aisle, picked up a bag of plain potato chips, and set it back down in the exact same spot. He repeated this with a candy bar in the next aisle. Not once did his facial expression change. The back of my neck prickled with unease. After a few minutes of this strange rousing, he approached the counter. Up close, I noticed more details that made me even more uncomfortable. His suit looked like something from the 1950s, well made, beautifully dated. His skin had an artificial smoothness to it, like plastic. "Good evening," he said. The words were perfectly pronounced, but there was no warmth in them, no humanity. "I would like to purchase a pack of Lucky Strikes, please." My stomach dropped. Rule 2. This was Rule 2 happening right in front of me. The man's eyes locked on mine, and I almost backed up. They didn't look real, just empty and lifeless. His eyes were flat and dead, staring at me without blinking. "Lucky Strikes," I repeated, trying to keep my voice steady. My hand moved to the beer cooler light switch under the counter. He flipped it on, watching as the neon sign in the back of the store buzzed to life. 1, 2, 3. The man didn't blink. Not once. 45-6. His head tilted slightly like a bird studying something curious. 7, 8, 9. I suddenly became aware of how alone I was in this gas station, how far away help would be if I needed it. 10. "Sorry," I said, forcing casualness into my voice. "We're out." For several long seconds, the man didn't move, didn't speak, just kept those glass eyes fixed on me. I was sweating now, drops forming in my forehead. Finally, his lips parted. "I see. Thank you anyway." Each word carefully enunciated as if he'd learned human speech by reading a textbook. He turned and walked out, movement still unnaturally fluid. I let out a big sigh. The security camera behind the counter gave me a view of the parking lot. The man got into a beige sedan and just sat there. No movement, no attempt to start the car, just sitting perfectly straight, hands resting on the steering wheel. For exactly 10 minutes, he remained that way. I timed it on my phone, unable to look away from them. Then, without any visible change in how he looked, he started Decker and drove away, keeping a perfect speed as he went down the highway. It spanned the rest of my shift, jumping at every sound, checking and rechecking the security monitors. When 5 a.m. came, I practically ran to my car. The next evening, I arrived early. Bruce Wazell ready, there counting cigarette cartons behind the counter. He nodded at me as I hung up my coat. "Hey," I said, trying to sound casual. "Something weird happened last night." Bruce glanced up briefly, then returned to his inventory sheet. "Weird how a guy came in asking for Lucky Strikes." His pen stopped moving and I did what the rule said. Turned on the cooler light, counted to 10, told him we were out. I leaned against the counter. "Bruce, what would have happened if I hadn't followed the rule?" His expression darkened, the lines in his face seeming to deepen. He sat down his clipboard and looked at me properly for the first time. "Cade, some questions are better left unanswered. Just follow thorough and you'll make it to the end of break." "That's not good enough," I pressed. "I deserve to know what I'm dealing with here." Bruce sighed, rubbing a calloused hand over his face. "You ever hear the saying, knowledge is a burden? Trust me when I say you're safer not knowing some things." That guy, his eyes weren't right. They looked like painted glass, because they were. Bruce went back to his counting, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. I stood there for a bit, wanting to ask for more information, but remembering the tapping at the window, the wrongness of that figure in the darkness. Maybe Bruce was right. Maybe some mysteries were better left unsolved. As he headed out for the night, Bruce paused at the door. "You did good following the rule. Keep doing that." He looked worried for a second. "This job ain't worth dying over." With those encouraging words, he walked out, leaving me alone with the buzz of the coolers and the quiet beep of the security system. I pulled Bruce's rules from my pocket and read them again, wondering what other horrors were waiting to test the remaining 3. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a test of survival, and I'd only begun to understand the rules of the game. December 23rd brought the worst snowstorm Cedar Rapids had seen in years. The flakes had started falling around 9 that morning, light and innocent at first. But by the time I arrived for my shift the world had transformed into a whiteout. I spent the first few hours watching the occasional brave soul pump gas, with hunched shoulders before hurrying back to their cars. After 8 p.m., the customers stopped coming altogether. I kept the rules folded in my back pocket now, their creases deepening with each passing day. Whenever I felt that nagging doubt, that voice suggesting maybe this was all just Bruce's way, of messing with the new guy. I thought about the thing with its wrong proportions tapping at the window, or the man with glass eyes asking for lucky strikes. The rules had saved me twice. No, I wasn't about to start questioning them. The roads outside shined under the parking lot lights, covered in a smooth blanket of snow, unmarked by tire tracks. No one in their right mind would be driving tonight. Not in this. I'd already called my parents to let them know I might need to sleep at the station if the roads didn't clear by closing time. I used the quiet hours to clean everything twice over. The coffee machine sparkled. The floor shined. I'd even organized the candy bars by color, then by size, then alphabetically. Anything to keep my mind occupied, and my eyes from drifting to the darkness beyond the windows. By midnight, I was back behind the counter, flipping through a paperback I'd brought from home. The heating system made a long way. The coolers buzzed. Outside, the snow continued to fall, thick and heavy, muffling the world. That's when I heard it. The unmistakable rumble of amateur cycle engine cutting through the silence. My head snapped up. Amateur cycle in this weather. The temperature had dropped to 15, and their snow was at least 8 in deep on the ground. No one would be crazy enough to ride a motorcycle tonight. The engine grew louder, then cut off abruptly. I set my book down and looked out the front windows. Through the curtain of snow, I could make out a large chapanier, the gas pumps, but no headlight, no movement. The door chimed. A figure stood in the entrance, so tall he had to duck to clear the doorframe. He must have been close to 7 feet. His bulk fell at the doorway completely, blocking the view outside. He wore motorcycle leathers from head to toe, thick and worn, with a black helmet that had a dark visor pulled down, making it impossible to see his face. Rule 3 flashed in my mind. If a tall biker in black leather comes in after midnight, give him a pack of Marl Brothers and the most expensive whiskey without being asked. My mouth went dry. I hadn't had to test this rule yet. The biker stood motionless just inside the door, snow melting off his leather jacket and forming small puddles on the freshly mopped floor. He made no move toward the counter yet. I could feel his attention fixed on me, even through that impenetrable visor. I swallowed hard and reached beneath the counter where we kept the cigarettes. My fingers closed around a pack of Marl. Then, I turned to the locked cabinet behind me where Robert stored the high-end liquor. The stuff that most gas station customers didn't bother with. I fumbled with the keys, very aware of the biker's presence, still unmoving, still silent. The most expensive bottle was a Mullen whiskey that cost more than I made in 2 shifts. I grabbed it and turned back toe-face to the counter. The biker had moved. He now stood directly in front of the register without making a sound. I hadn't heard a single footstep. I placed both items on the counter with hands that shook no matter how much I tried to eat them. "Here you go," I said, my voice barely audible. The biker didn't respond, for what felt like minutes, but was probably only seconds. He stayed completely still. Then slowly, he reached for the offerings. As his arm moved, the sleeve of his jacket rode up slightly. What I saw wasn't skin. No He-Man skin, anyway. It was covered in what looked like scales, dark green with black spots that shined under the store lights. They weren't tattoos. They were actual scales overlapping like a reptile's. I gasped and stepped back. The biker paused, then pulled his sleeve down before taking the Marlboro whiskey. He stood there for an thermometer, then gave me a simple nod, maybe saying thanks, or making some kind of promise. Whatever it meant, it made me feel cold all over. Then he turned and walked out, the door chiming behind him. I heard the motorcycle start up through the snow. The sound quickly disappeared. My legs felt shaky. I leaned against the counter, letting out a long breath. After several minutes, I felt steady now to check the security monitors. The cameras should have caught the biker leaving, maybe even shown me a better look at his motorcycle. But the screens showed only empty lot. White snow under yellow lights. No tire tracks, no footprints. No sign that anyone had gone in the last several hours. I checked the recording, looking at every camera angle covering the lot and the roads leading to and from the station. Nothing, according to the security system. No one had visited the Soko since 8:47 p.m. when a plow driver had stopped for coffee. Yet, the Marlows were gone. So was the McCullen, and I couldn't forget those scales under the leather. With shaking fingers, I pulled out my phone and called Bruce. It was late, and I half expected him to ignore the call, but he picked up after the second ring. What happened? No greeting, no questions about why I was calling after midnight. He knew Thibika, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. He came in, tall guy in leather, with a black helmet. Bruce was quiet for a moment. You give him what he Marlboro and the expensive whiskey, just like the rules say. Good dot, another pause. That one's dangerous. Good job staying alive. Bruce, I started, not sure what question I wanted to ask first. What was he? Why did he want these specific items? Why couldn't I see him on the cameras? But Bruce cut me off. Get back behind the counter. Lock the doors, if you haven't already. I'll see you tomorrow. He hung up before I could say anything. I stared at my phone for a bit, then put it back in my pocket with the rules. I did as Bruce suggested, checking the locks on both doors before going back to my desk. The night was long and quiet except for the soft hiss of snow against the windows. I kept looking at the security screens, half expecting to see the biker return. But they showed only empty whiteness until morning. As dawn came and the snow finally stopped, I couldn't forget those scales or the nod the biker had given me. He'd done his part of whatever weird arrangement was going on, and I'd done mine. I'd made it through another night at the Snacko, but with each shift, I kept wondering how many more rules would have tested before I was done working here. The day after Christmas felt strange. After 3 days away from Snacko, after 3 days of normal life with my family in a downtown Cedar Rapids apartment, the gas station fluorescent lights seemed harsher. The silence between customers more. I'd spent Christmas trying to forget about glass eyes and reptilian skin patches, focusing instead on Mum's turkey dinner and Dad's awkward questions about my sudden career change from pre-med to English literature. But now, back behind the counter, the folded paper of rules in my pocket, reality changed back to whatever passed for normal at this place. Post-holiday traffic made the evening busier than usual. A steady stream of travelers filled their tanks and grabbed snacks for the road, many looking tired after long family visits. I rang up cafes and energy drinks for blue-eyed drivers, heading home after extended Christmas celebrations. Just this. N20 and Pump 5, a middle-aged man in a University of Iowa sweatshirt said, placing a bag of beef jerky on the counter. I nodded, scanning the item, heading back to Iowa City. Yeah, the wife's already there. I stayed an extra day with the in-laws. He rolled his eyes good-naturedly. Normal conversation, normal For a moment, I could pretend this was just a regular job at a regular gas station. The rush continued until about 9:30 when the traffic finally slowed. By 10 o'clock, the lot was nearly empty. Just a couple of semis parked in the back, where drivers caught quick naps. I used the lull to restock the coffee station and wipe down tech counters. Bruce's training had stuck with me. Keep busy. Stay alert. The door chimed as I was arranging coffee airs. I looked up to see a woman entering the store. She wore a brighted coat that stood out against the night. Her dark hair fell just past her shoulders, and she walked with a smoothness that I noticed. Right away, something about her didn't seem right, but I couldn't pin down what. She didn't have the mechanical movements of the man with glass eyes, nor the overwhelming presence of the biker. She looked human at first glance, attractive even as she browsed through the aisles. I watched her from the corner of my eye while wiping down the coffee counter. She picked up a chocolate bar, looked et au revoir, then moved to the next aisle where she grabbed a magazine. She moved in a way that seemed normal. Nothing obviously wrong. The door chimed again as an older couple entered, stomping snow from their boots. "Excuse me," the woman called out, approaching the register. "Do you have road maps? We're trying to find Highway 13, but our GPCB's cutting out." "Sure thing," I said, coming around the counter. I led them to a small rack near the front window, where we kept local maps. "This one covers all of Cedar Rapids and their surrounding highways." The woman thanked me, and I returned to the counter. As I rang up their pitches, I saw a bit of red. The woman in the red coat passing behind them, still shopping. After the couple left, the store got really quiet. No footsteps, no sound of packaging being touched. I looked around but couldn't see the woman in red anywhere. "Hello," I called out. No response. I stepped out from behind the counter and walked down each aisle systematically. The store wasn't large. 6 short aisles. The coolers along the back wall, a small restroom corridor. I checked everywhere, including the restrooms. The woman had vanished. But here's the thing. She hadn't left. The bell above the door hadn't chimed, and I'd been watching the entrance the whole time I helped the couple with their map. There was no way she could have exited without me noticing. I returned to the counter, my skin crawling with worry. Rule 4 suddenly pushed its way to the front of my mind. If someone appears on the security camera, but isn't physically in the store, call this number. I turned out to the security monitor behind the counter. The screen was split into 4 quadrants showing different angles of the store. 3 showed empty aisles exactly as they should, but the 4th, The one covering the back corner near the refrigerated drinks showed something that made my blood go cold. The woman in the red coat stood there perfectly still, items still held. In her hand she was looking directly at the camera with a smile that stretched too wide across her face. As I watched, frozen in place, she raised one hand and waved, her movements jerky on the screen. I quickly looked over my shoulder at the actual corner. Empty. Completely empty. She was only visible on the camera. My hands shook as I pulled Bruce's rules from my pocket and fumbled for my phone. The number 4 rule 4 was scrolled at the bottom of the page. I dialed with clumsy fingers, nearly dropping the phone in my haste. Bruce answered on the first ring. "What is it?" His voice was alert, as if he'd been waiting for the call. "There's a woman in a red coat," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. As I kept my eyes on the monitor, she was on the security camera, but not in the store. Rule 4. Bruce was quiet for a moment. "Don't look away from the monitor. Don't approach where she's standing. I'll be there in 15 minutes. What should I stay at the counter? Watch her. If she moves, don't follow," he hung up. For the next 15 minutes, I stood still behind the counter, my eyes glued to the monitor. The woman barely moved. Just a slight swaying like she was listening to music only she could hear. That smile stayed on her face the whole time. Sometimes she would look right into the camera, and her smile would get even wider, showing teeth that seemed too many, too sharp. No customers came in, thankfully. I'm not sure I could have paid attention to them while keeping watch on the monitor. Bruce arrived exactly when Hesedy would. He came through the front door without his usual relaxed attitude, looking dead serious. He had on a heavy coat and was carrying what looked like a duffel bag. "Where?" he asked without preamble. I pointed. "To the monitor, then to the corresponding corner of the store, back by the energy drinks. She's just standing there." Bruce nodded, setting his bag on the counter. Unzipped it and removed several items I couldn't quite make out. Something that looked like salt, a small bottle of clear liquid, and what appeared to be a bundle of dried herbs. "Listen carefully," he said, his voice low and serious. "Stay behind the counter. Don't turn around. No matter what you hear, don't look back. There until I tell you. It's safe, understand?" I nodded, my mouth too dry to speak. Bruce took a deep breath, then went toward the back corner. I kept my eyes forward as told, looking at the door and the night beyond the windows, but I could still see the monitor from where I stood. On screen, the woman's smile grew impossibly wider as Bruce came closer. She seemed to know he was coming for her, even though he wasn't visible on that particular camera angle. What's up next was hard to process. On the monitor, Bruce stepped into frame, standing directly in front of the woman. His back was to the camera, but I could see him speaking, though no sound came through. The woman's smile never changed as she responded, her lips moving too fast, making words no human mouth should be able to speak. Behind him, I heard whispering, actual whispering from the corner that should have been empty. I needed the money. That's what I kept telling myself as I pulled into the employee parking lot at Sunset Cove Water Park. The Miami sun beat down on my car, which didn't have working AC, and I was already sweating through mid-shirt before I even turned off the engine. The online job listing had promised competitive pay for lifeguards, and as a broke college student heading into my junior year, I couldn't afford to be picky. My swim team experience made me qualified, at least on paper. I grabbed my backpack, locked my car, and headed toward the staff entrance. The park wasn't open to the public yet. He checked my watch. 8:15 a.m., 15 minutes early for my 8:30 meeting with the manager. Good start, I thought. A middle-aged man in a polo shirt with the Sunset Cove logo waved me over as I approached the gate. He had the weathered look of someone who'd spent too much time in the Florida sun. "Michael Reynolds?" he asked. "That's me," I said, extending my hand. "Everyone calls me Mike." "Robert Martinez, park manager." His handshake was firm. "Glad to have you on board. Your swimming credentials are impressive. For years on your collect team here, though, I'm taking a break this year to focus on classes." Robert nodded and began leading me through the empty park. The place was eerily quiet without visitors, just the sound of pumps running and water flowing through the various attractions. We passed the wave pool, a lazy river, and several twisting slides that rose up overhead. "We run a tight ship here," Robert said as we walked. "Safety is our priority. We haven't had a major incident in years, and I'd like to keep it that way." Something about the way he emphasized major incident made me curious, but I didn't ask. Instead, he nodded and tried to look appropriately serious about water safety. Robert stopped at a door marked staff only and swiped his key card. "This is our break room and locker area. You'll meet John Sullivan inside." He's been with us for longer than anyone. He'll show you the ropes and go over some specific procedures we have here at Sunset Cove. The break room was small but clean, with a mini fridge, microwave, and a few tables. A man sat at one of them, staring at a cup of coffee. He looked up when we entered. "John, this is Michael, our new lifeguard." Michael John Sullivan. John didn't smile or stand. He just looked at me with eyes that were very alert and watchful for someone sitting in a break room. His skin was rough and weather-red from years in the harsh Florida sun. He looked to be in his late 40s, but moved quickly like someone much younger when he finally stood up. "I'll leave you two to get acquainted," Robert said, order backing toward the door. "John will go over everything you need to know." Hegaf. John a nod that seemed loaded with meaning before leaving. For a moment, John and I just stood there in awkward silence. I was about to make a joke about the weather when he spoke. "You swim competitively?" It wasn't a question. "Yeah, for years in college." "That's good. You'll need to be strong." He picked up a red folder from the table. "Your uniform and rotation schedule are in here. First shift starts at the wave pool, noon to 4. But before that," John reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He smoothed it on the table and pushed it toward me. "Thesia, the rules. Learn them." I looked down at the hand. 1. Stay in your chair during drownings until backup arrives. 2. If you see a woman behind the maintenance shed after hours, ignore her. 3. If a man waves to you from the deep end of the pool, wave back exactly once for never open or use the blue locker in the staff locker room. 5. Alert me immediately if fog appears over any water, regardless of whether I read the list twice. Waiting for John to crack a smile or say it was a joke. He didn't. His face stayed completely serious. "Is this some kind of hazing thing for new employees?" I asked with a nervous laugh. John's expression didn't change. "Follow these rules or you'll die." The bluntness of his statement caught me off guard. "No, you might get fired or it's for your safety. Just you'll die." "Okay, sure," I said, trying to play along. "Stay in the chair. Avoid creepy women. Wave at pool men. No blue locker. Watch for spooky fog." "Got it. This is Anna," joked Michael. His voice had dropped lower. "These rules keep Plilev." I nodded, not sure what else to do. Clearly, this guy took whatever were tradition this was very seriously. Maybe it was some elaborate prank to staff played on newcomers. I'd go along with it for now. "I understand," I said, trying to sound sincere. John studied my face for a moment. Then, seemed satisfied. "Get changed. I'll show you around before your shift starts." Thelica room was standard. Rows of metal lockers, showers, bathroom stalls. John pointed me to an empty locker where I could store my things. "You can use any unclaimed locker except the blue one." "No," I finished for him, still thinking this was all some weird game. As I changed into the red shorts and tank top with lifeguard printed across the chest, John waited by the door. He seemed tense, his eyes always moving, checking corners and shadows. The tour of the park was thorough, but strange. John didn't just show me where everything was. He showed me exactly where to watch, how to keep my eyes on the water, and which paths to take peed stations. He went over the safety rules with a seriousness that seemed over the top for a pool job. "Always scan the bottom of the pool every 30 seconds, he said as we stood by the edge of the main pool. "Count the pool in your zone when you start your shift, then count again every 5 minutes. Standard lifeguard procedure." But the way he said it made it sound like a special routine. By the time noon rolled around, I was starting to wonder if I'd made a mistake taking this job. But the thought of my empty bank account kept me climbing up to the high chair overlooking the wave pool as guests began packing into the park. The first few hours of my shift were normal enough. Kids splashing, teenagers showing off, parents trying to relax while keeping an eye on their children. I stayed alert, blew my whistle a few times at runners, and helped a lost child find his mother. I noticed John wasn't sitting in his chair by the deep end of the main pool. He was standing beside it, his posture stiff. He's always looking at the water. Not just casually watching, but staring with such focus. It was like he expected something to come up from the bottom at any moment. He hardly blinked. When my break came, I headed to the staff room where I met a few other lifeguards. They seemed normal enough, talking about guests and upcoming shifts. I wanted to ask about John Andy's strange rules, but something stopped me. Instead, I ate my sandwich and listened to their conversations, trying to catch any hint that they found the place as weird as I was beginning to think. The rest of my shift was quiet. As closing time approached, the number of guests got smaller. The announcement for final swim came over the loudspeakers. And 30 minutes later, the park was empty, except for staff. I was helping clean up some trash when I noticed John making his rounds, but they weren't casual walks around the park. They were careful, thorough checks of every pool, every water feature. He would stop at specific points, stare into the water for exactly the same amount of time, then move to the next spot. It looked less like end-of-day inspection and more like some kind of strange routine. When I finished my duties, he headed back to the locker room to change. That's when I saw it. The blue locker, somehow. I'd missed it earlier. While all the other lockers were a standard gray metal, this one was painted a deep blue. And now that I was alone in the room, I noticed something else. Faint black stains around its edges, like something had leaked out and been quickly cleaned up. Rule 4 suddenly felt less like a joke. That locker gave me the creeps. I changed it quickly, keeping my back to it, unable to shake the feeling that something inside might be listening, waiting. As I walked to my car in the evening light, I couldn't help glancing back at the main pool, still visible through the fence. The water should have been still with the pumps turned off for the night. It wasn't. Across the surface, a ripple moved from one end to the other, as if something had just passed beneath. Something big. I stood frozen, watching until the water went still again. Then I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove away much faster than the parking lot speed limit allowed. Maybe it was just the wind, I told myself. Maybe a pump was still running, but I knew better. And suddenly, John's rules didn't seem like hazing anymore. I spent the night trying to convince myself I hadn't seen what I thought I saw in that pool. The ripple could have been anything. A leaf blown across the surface, a pump still running, maybe even my imagination after a long first day. But no matter how I rationalized it, I kept circling back to John's rules and his deadly serious warning. I barely slept. The next day at the park was busy now to keep my mind occupied. But I found myself watching John more closely, the way he walked the deck. Eyes always looking around the water, stopping at exact spots to stare at certain areas. It wasn't normal lifeguard behavior, not even close. 2 days after receiving those strange rules, I was stationed at the lazy river, sitting in the high chair that gave me a clear view of the Insomnia.official waterway. The summer heat beat down hard and the water shined under the midday sun, as floated by on colorful tubes. I kept checking left to right, top to bottom, watching for any signs of trouble. That's when I noticed her, a small girl, maybe 8 years old, who had somehow slipped off her tube in the section where the river curved behind a rock formation. Her head bobbed up once, arms waving wildly before she went under again. The inventory system's pretty simple, too. For the next 20 minutes, I walked trying through the basics: how to ring up gas, where the cleaning supplies were kept, when deliveries arrived, normal job stuff. I had Bruce's rules in my back pocket. The folded paper had become so worn that its creases were starting to tear several times. I almost pulled it out to hand to him. I almost told him about locking the doors at 1:30, about the man with glass eyes who asked for lucky strikes, about the biker who needed Marlboro and expensive whiskey. I almost warned him about the woman in red who only appeared on camera and the black car you should never ever look at. But each time I started to say the words, something stopped me. Maybe it was the memory of how I'd felt when Bruce fed me Matt List. The doubt, the certainty that he was just a paranoid old man with weird superstitions. Ryan would have to learn the way I had. Or maybe I just didn't want to be the crazy guy handing over strange warnings on his last day. Anything else I should know? Ryan asked Otis. Our impromptu training session wound down. Robert mentioned there might be some unusual aspects to the job. I paused, Kieran halfway extended toward him. Had Robert told him something, or was this just standard new job anxiety? I made my decision. Just do what Bruce tells you, I said, giving him the keys. He knows this place better than anyone. Ryan nodded, Cliffy hoping for more information, but too polite to push. Thanks, I appreciate it. As I gathered my things from the back office, I noticed Bruce's rules still in my back pocket. I took out the worn paper and looked at it for a bit. Then I folded it one more time and put it back in my pocket. Something told me I might need it again someday. I clocked out for the last time at 5:57 a.m. outside. The sky was getting brighter, with early morning starting to show. I walked to my car without looking back at the station until I was behind the wheel. From there, the Sunoco looked completely ordinary. Just a gas station with buzzing fluorescent lights and windows that needed Cliffy. Ryan was behind the counter, already looking a little as Bruce's car wasn't around. I started the engine and pulled out of the lot. As I drove toward campus and what passed for normal life, I thought about Bruce's words. Wear it if you decide to come back next break. The silver eye pendant was in my pocket next to my final paycheck. Would I come back when summer arrived? Part of me said absolutely not. I'd survived this job by pure luck and Bruce's help. Only a fool would return to a place where reality itself was thin and unreliable. But another part of me, a part I didn't fully understand yet, made me think I might. After seeing what existed beyond normal reality, I might not be able to pretend I hadn't seen it. The gas station disappeared in my rearview mirror as I rounded a curve. The road ahead clearing toward Iowa City. I'd be back in my dorm room by noon, unpacking for the new semester, preparing for classes that explored fictional horrors instead of real ones. But Theo's mysteries would stay with me long after I returned to normal life. In the shadows, I'd now always check twice. In the security cameras, I'd never fully trust. And in the silver eye in my pocket, waiting for my decision.